The way I recollect it, that town weren't much more than a stubborn dream hammered into the red clay by folks too mule-headed to quit. Stage line cut through it like a scar, wagons rattling in with dust so thick it turned the sun to a copper coin. They called the place Sanduro, though most just said the line, on account of it sitting square where the stage stopped for fresh horses and whiskey. Sanduro had one street worth speaking of, crooked as a drunkard's walk, lined with false front buildings that looked taller than they truly were. Saloons sat heavy in the middle, doors swinging like a preacher's arms on Sunday. Across from it, a church stood lean and hungry, boards warped, bell cracked, but faith rang louder than iron. Now, I ain't one for preaching, but I'll tell you plain. That church was built with more hope than lumber and more prayers than nails. Reverend Calloway, thin as a fence rail, kept it upright with sermons that could blister paint. Folks listened 'cause they needed something to believe in, even if it was just the sound of a man refusing to bow to the wind. The saloon, though, that was where Sanduro's heartbeat poker tables, scarred from years of coin and whiskey, piano keys yellowed like old teeth, and a bar polished by elbows, leaning heavy with regret. Men came in from cattle drives, railroad crews, and dust storms that could skin a mule, all looking for a hand of cards or a woman's smile. I remember the night it all began, the slow burn trouble that would stretch across months like a storm cloud refusing to break. The stranger. He rode in at sundown, horse lathered, eyes shadowed beneath a hat pulled low. Dust clung to him like he'd been born of it. Didn't say much, just tied his mount outside the saloon and stepped in like he owned the floorboards. "Whiskey," he told the barkeep, voice rough as gravel. Folks turned to look, 'cause in Sanduro, a stranger was a story, waiting to be told. Some said he was a drifter. Others whispered bounty hunter. Me, I just watched. He carried himself like a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little. Gun hung low on his hip, worn smooth from use. His boots spoke of miles, his eyes of reckonings, yet unpaid. Poker table was callin', and he answered sat down across from Clay McKinnon, ranch foreman known for cheatin' near as much as breathin'. Clay grinned, teeth sharp, and dealt the cards. "Buy-in steep, mister," Clay said. The stranger slid a coin across the wood. Steeper the better. And just like that, the air thickened. The game cards slapped, whiskey poured, and the piano stumbled through a tune. I watched from the corner, pipe smoke curling like ghosts. Clay played hard, eyes narrow, fingers slick. Stranger played quiet, face unreadable, chips stacking slow but steady. By midnight, Clay's grin had soured. Stranger's pile was high. Folks leaned in, breath held, 'cause poker and Sanduro weren't just cards. It was pride, land, sometimes blood. "You're cheatin'," Clay spat, voice sharp. Stranger didn't flinch. "Only thing I'm cheatin' is fate." Clay's hand went to his gun, but the stranger's was quicker. Steel flashed, barrel steady. Silence fell like a shroud. "Best let the cards speak," the stranger said, calm as a preacher at a graveside. Clay froze, sweat beat on his brow. Then he laughed, forced and hollow, and dropped his hand. "Guess luck's on your side tonight." But luck's a fickle friend, and I knew Clay wouldn't let it rest. Dust storm next day, wind rose mean. Dust storm rolled in from the mesas. Sky turned the color of old blood. Folks huddled inside, shutters rattling, prayers whispered. Stranger sat in the saloon, hat tipped low, whiskey untouched. Reverend Calloway crossed the street, robes flapping, and stepped inside like he was marching into hell. "You bring trouble," the Reverend told him, voice sharp. Stranger looked up, eyes tired. "Trouble finds me, preacher. I just ride its shadow." Calloway frowned, but said no more. He knew some battles weren't fought with words. Storm raged 3 days, sand burying fences, cattle lost, temper short. When it cleared, Sanduro looked older, worn, like the storm had carved lines into its bones. And Clay McKinnon, he'd been waiting. Railroad men. The railroad was sniffing round Sanduro, talking of tracks cutting through the mesas, iron horses replacing stage lines. Some folks saw fortune, others saw ruin. Clay was thick with railroad men, scheming for land, bribing with whiskey and cards. Strangers' winnings had cut deep, and Clay wanted payback. One night, railroad men sat heavy in the saloon, maps spread, voices low. Stranger walked in, eyes sharp, and Clay saw his chance. "Deal 'em," Clay said. "Cards ready." Stranger sat, silent. Game began. This time, Clay didn't cheat with cards. He cheated with men. Railroad toughs stood close, hands near guns, eyes mean. Stranger played on, chips rising. But the air was poison. When Clay lost again, he slammed the table. "You ain't leaving Sanduro alive." Stranger's hand went to his gun, but so did theirs. And that's when the church bell rang, cracked, broken, but loud enough to freeze the room for. Reverend Calloway stood outside, bell rope in hand, eyes burning. "This town ain't yours," he shouted, voice carrying through dust and whiskey. "Not Clay's, not railroads, not strangers. It belongs to the Lord, or it belongs to the grave." Silence held. Guns lowered, grudging. Stranger rose, chips left behind. "Guess I'll ride," he said, voice low. But I knew he wouldn't. Trouble had its claws in him, and Sanduro was the kind of town that didn't let go. That was the beginning. Dust storms, poker games, railroad schemes, and a stranger who carried fate like a saddlebag. Sanduro was a town balanced on the edge of a knife, and every soul in it knew the blade was sharp. I reckon you're wondering what came next. Well, that's a tale for Chapter 2, where cattle drives thunder, blood gets spilled, and the stranger's past comes riding hard. The storm had passed, but Sanduro weren't the same. Dust clung to the town like a second skin, and folks walked slower, eyes wary. Trouble had settled in like a squatter, and everyone knew it had a name. Clay McKinnon. Clay had lost face at the poker table, lost coin, lost pride. And in a town where pride was worth more than cattle, that cut deep. He'd taken to drinking heavier, scheming louder, and whispering with railroad men who promised him power if he could clear the way. The stranger, folks started calling him Jonah, though he never said if that was true. Kept to himself. He'd ride out at dawn, scout the mesas, return at dusk with dust on his boots and silence in his eyes. Some said he was hunting someone. Others said he was running from something. Me, I reckoned he was both. Cattle drive thundered in from the north, longhorns bawling, cow hands lean and sunburnt. Drive meant money, meant whiskey, meant fights. Sanduro swelled with noise, poker tables crowded, saloon thick with sweat and laughter. Jonah sat quiet, watching Clay strutted, dealing cards, laughing too loud. Railroad men lingered, eyes sharp, maps folded in pockets. One night, drive hands packed the saloon, dust still on their coats. Clay dealt a game. Jonah sat opposite. Stakes rose, coins, deeds, promises. "Railroad's coming," Clay said, voice oily. "Gonna make this town rich. You best pick a side, stranger." Jonah's eyes narrowed. "Railroad don't build towns. It swallows 'em." Clay sneered. "Then you'll be swallowed whole." Cards fell. Jonah won. Clay's face twisted, rage boiling. That night, cattle drive hands found Jonah outside, guns drawn. He moved like shadow, steel flashing, shots cracking. 2 men fell, dust drinking their blood. Jonah stood, breath steady, eyes cold. Word spread fast. Jonah weren't just a drifter, he was death riding quiet. Railroad men tightened their hold. They bought land cheap, bribed sheriffs, promised jobs. Reverend Calloway preached against them, voice thundering in the cracked church. "This iron beast will strip us bare," he warned. "It'll take our cattle, our land, our souls." Folks listened, but fear was louder. Railroad meant progress, and progress don't ask permission. Clay became their mouthpiece, swaggering through town, pockets heavy with coin. He swore Jonah was a threat, a killer, a man who'd burned Sanduro to ash. Sheriff tried to arrest Jonah, but Jonah slipped like smoke. Some said he had friends in the mesas. Others said he was just too fast. Truth was, Jonah carried a past heavier than iron. One night, storm clouds gathering. Jonah sat in the saloon, whiskey untouched. A cattle hand leaned close, whispering, "You're Jonah Hale, ain't ya? Gunman from Abilene killed 3 men in a railroad feud." Jonah's jaw tightened. Names don't matter. But the name spread. Folks remembered stories. Abilene, blood spilled over tracks. Men dying for land. Jonah had been there. Gun smoking. Eyes cold. Clay seized it. "See? He's a killer. Railroad's right. We gotta rid Sanduro of him." But some folks saw different. They saw a man who stood against iron, who fought for land, who carried guilt like a saddlebag, but still rode on. Reverend Calloway sought Jonah out, found him sitting by the cracked bell, eyes on the stars. "You can't outrun your past," Calloway said. Jonah's voice was low. "Ain't trying to outrun it, just hoping to bury it." Calloway nodded. "Then bury it here. Stand with us. Clay's selling this town to the railroad. We need someone who ain't afraid to fight." Jonah looked at the church, boards warped, faith stronger than nails. He saw a town hanging on by grit and prayer. "Fightin' don't save towns," he said. Calloway's eyes burned. "Sometimes it's the only thing that does." Blood in the street Clay made his move. Railroad men backed him, cattle hands armed. They marched through Sanduro, demanding land, demanding obedience. Jonah stood in the street, dust swirling, hand on his gun. "Town ain't yours," he said, voice steady. Clay laughed. "It's already bought." Guns drew, shots cracked, dust filled with smoke. Men fell, blood darkening the clay. Jonah moved like a storm, gun flashing, eyes cold. Clay fired, missed. Jonah fired, hit. Clay staggered, rage twisting, but didn't fall. Railroad men pulled back, but Clay swore vengeance. Sanduro bled that night. Church bell tolled, cracked but loud. Folks buried their dead, prayed for mercy, feared the storm yet to come. Jonah stood alone, past heavy, future darker. Clay lived, railroad pressed harder, and the town balanced on the edge of ruin. That was the middle of it. The cattle, the iron, the blood. Chapter 3 will bring the reckoning. Clay's vengeance, railroad's grip, Jonah's fate, and Sanduro's soul decided in dust and fire. Sanduro woke uneasy. Streets carried the smell of gunpowder, and the clay still drank, the blood spilled in the night. Folks whispered in corners, eyes darting, wondering if the town had already been sold to iron and greed. Clay McKinnon limped through the street, rage burning hotter than the desert sun. His wound hadn't killed him, but it had carved hate-deep railroad men shadowed him, whispering promises of land and power. Clay swore Jonah Hale would die and Sanduro would kneel. Jonah, though, he stayed quiet, sat outside the church, hat low, eyes on the cracked bell. Reverend Calloway stood beside him, voice steady. "You can't keep running, Jonah. Clay won't stop. Railroad won't stop. This town needs you." Jonah's jaw tightened. "I ain't no savior preacher. Just a man with a gun and too many ghosts." Calloway's eyes burned. "Sometimes that's enough." By week's end, railroad men gathered the town. Maps spread, contracts waived. They promised jobs, money, progress. All they asked was land, church land, ranch land, saloon land. Clay stood tall, wound bandaged, voice sharp. Sign and Sanduro lives. Refuse, and it dies. Folks wavered. Progress was a sweet word, but it tasted of iron and chains. Jonah stepped forward, voice low but carrion. Railroad don't build towns. It buries 'em. I seen Abilene. I seen men die for tracks. You sign, you ain't saving Sanduro. You're selling it. Clay sneered. You ain't from here. You don't get a say. Jonah's eyes narrowed. I got a say 'cause I buried men who thought like you. The crowd hushed. Railroad men shifted, hands near guns. It came to a head in the street, dust swirling, sun burning low. Clay stood, gun at his hip, eyes wild. Jonah faced him, calm as stone. Town ain't big enough for both, Clay spat. Jonah's voice was steady. It ain't about us, it's about them. He nodded to the crowd, to the church, to the saloon. But if it takes blood to decide, then let it be ours. Silence held. Then steel flashed. Clay drew fast, rage driving him. Jonah drew steady, past guiding him. Shots cracked, dust jumped, echoes rang. Clay staggered, bullet in his chest, eyes wide. He dropped. Clay drinking his blood. Jonah stood, smoke curling from his gun, breath slow. Aftermath, railroad men faltered. Their mouthpiece lay dead, their promises hollow. Folks turned, faith stronger than fear. Reverend Calloway rang the cracked bell, sound carrying through dust. This town ain't for sale, he thundered. Not to iron, not to greed. It belongs to us. Railroad men left, muttering, maps torn. Sanduro stood, battered but unbroken. Jonah holstered his gun, eyes heavy. My trail ends here, he said, voice low. Calloway shook his head. No, it begins here. Jonah looked at the town. Saloon scarred, church cracked, folks weary but standin'. He saw a place worth fighting for, worth burying ghosts in. He tipped his hat, eyes on the horizon. Maybe so. And that's how Sanduro held. Dusty, stubborn, scarred but alive. Clay McKinnon fell. Railroad pulled back. And Jonah Hale found something he hadn't carried in years. A reason to stay. The frontier don't give easy endings, but sometimes it gives reckonings. And reckonings, well, they're the closest thing to justice a town like Sanduro ever sees.